expertise. I'm Katie McEwen, your host, the Procurement Girl, representing BuyerQuest, the most user-friendly procurement solution in the world. TenureTalks streams live every Friday on LinkedIn and is available anywhere you get your podcasts. I'm excited to introduce you to our rockstar guest today, David Swift. He has extensive expertise in procurement supply chain. He's led 3 different huge transformation in the last 10 years with over 25 years of experience in the space. He certainly has the battle scars to prove it and a ton of expertise. He's the former head of procurement corporate services at Novartis. Thank you so much for joining us today, David.
Thank you, Katie. And I certainly have the battle scars, but I'm not sure about being the rock star. That's the first time I've been introduced like that. But anyway, a pleasure to be with you.
Well, great. Just take it and run with it.
Yeah.
So tell us what you've been working on this year and kind of what your focus is right now.
Well, in the corporate services area, we have a whole variety of professional services categories, from consulting, human capital, legal services, travel fleet, etc. But and they're all really interesting. But there's one probably closest to my heart, and it's really sort of around the whole idea of the future of work, and what has been dubbed total talent management. And in many organizations, certainly in large corporates, you'll have your traditional hiring of full-time equivalents, which is done by your HR function, talent acquisition. But then alongside that, you'll have a growing proportion of the workforce who are non-employees. So they are contractors, they are consultants, they are freelancers. And now you have more and more freelance platforms. You have the whole outsourcing piece. But all of that is run in silos, and most companies don't look at it holistically. And for the most part, HR only looks at the full-time equivalent piece of that pie. And in Novartis, for example, 100,000 employees, but another 50,000 non-employee that we can recognize or see, maybe even more. So it gives you an idea of the proportion of the workforce that's non-employees. So what myself and my team were driving this, actually more than last year, it's been almost 3 years I've been trying to sell it, is the idea of total workforce management, having a holistic approach to managing the workforce, putting on top strategic workforce planning. And the idea behind it, it's not the sort of traditional procurement idea of driving savings, but it's about, in a knowledge economy, how do we enable our business to have the best talent out there? That's a competitive advantage if you can do it. In the pharma industry, like many other industries, getting the best brains is really important. And I like to say my job is to get the unfair share of that talent into Novartis so we can beat the competition.
That's right. Well, that's great. Well, it sounds like you've definitely had your hands full when working there. I can't even imagine all the stressful nights that you had to deal with, especially with working so international. That must have kept you pretty busy.
So yeah, it's a big organization with lots of stakeholders. So yeah, it keeps people busy for sure.
Yes, absolutely. So who was that one person that really inspired your road to success? A mentor, a coach, or a parent, someone who really inspired where you are right now?
I think there's a few actually, but at different stages of my career, I had one of my first bosses. His name was Phil Guido. He was a New Jersey Italian. I worked for a company called Foot Locker at the time, and he really sort of taught me what it's like to work in a big corporate. And I was young, dumb, and full of enthusiasm, and had a big mouth on me or whatever, and then get you into lots of trouble by saying what you actually think. And he sort of showed me the ropes. I think he recognized in me himself as a younger man, and maybe tried to help me not to make some of the errors that he made. And I appreciated that, because it's not every manager that would be bothered to do that, and they'd let you go and do your own car crash. And I'm sure I did make a few car crashes, but he tried to steer me away from some of them. And I guess that was one of the first. And then more laterally, in my previous company, a company called Borealis in Belgium, my CPO, my boss, he was a fantastic CPO, and he showed me, he was a great salesman. And maybe it's counterintuitive, but actually I believe that the single biggest thing that we need in procurement is good salespeople, because the more you go up in the hierarchy, the more you spend your time selling or influencing, depending on what you want to call it. And he was excellent at that, and a real inspiration in how to do that. He could sell sand to the Arabs without any problem, and he he actually, yeah, he probably did that. And the other thing that he taught me as well, the same CPO, his name was Nando. He described it in a way. He said, "You're the captain of this big cruise ship, and you're up on the bridge, and you're making sure that it doesn't run aground." He says, "But what you need to do as well is actually pull over, get off, and go onto the islands and go exploring in the islands." And what he meant by that was, it's not enough just to run the ship from A to B and make sure that everything's ticking over nicely, but you had to go and look for new things, different things, what I would call innovation, change, whatever. And he was really very good at that. So you need to be much more than just a technician that's good at doing a job, but you actually need to bring something novel, new to the business. And I've always tried thereafter, every year you've got your targets and say, okay, what do you want to do different this year? What kind of special thing do you want to do? And I think that's what helps people stand out from the crowd, because if you just do what everybody else does, well, so what? Even if you do it very well, that's just expected. So yeah, they're two people that when I look back, they taught me a lot.
Yeah, I love that analogy of the ship. You have to get out of your comfort zone and innovate and explore and find new technologies and new systems. And if you're not
just
doing
new
it
ideas,
consistently,
and try and shake things up, and try and, yourself do things differently, but also help the business that you work in do differently. So I sat on the HR leadership team in Novartis, and I have to say, HR as a function is typically quite conservative. I would even, if I'm very critical, say they're still stuck in the 20th century. And they suffer from some of the same problems that procurement suffers from. They're not necessarily seen as strategic. They're led rather than lead themselves. So I tried to shake them up, and I brought them lots of new ideas, and we had a great time doing it. And I think wherever part of procurement you're in, that's what I think good procurement does. It doesn't just accept the status quo. It's always looking to shake the tree.
Yeah, they don't stick to, if it's not broke, don't fix it. They go out there and try to make it better.
That's boring, right?
Right. Exactly.
That's not what I get up in the morning to do, right? I want to do something exciting.
Exactly. And with younger people coming into the workforce, we have to give them, a solution and a way to get things done faster and easier, or they won't do it.
Yeah. And they have their own ideas, and they will look at the world slightly differently to people of my generation, and good. I want them to come with new ideas and challenge me and challenge their stakeholders, and that's how we advance. That's how we make things better. And you got to be open to that. Not everybody wants to do that, but I like that.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of innovation, what's the most innovative thing you're seeing in the space right now?
Well, there's many things, but just very recently, you may know them, I came across a company called Fulcrum. Sean and Trevor, the two founders, are based out in San Diego. And what they're trying to do, and it plays into the space that I mentioned earlier, which is the workplace. They're trying to optimize the way work gets done by marketing work to different talent channels that I mentioned. So usually if I want to hire somebody, I'll go to my talent acquisition team, and I'll go and look for a full-time equivalent. And if I want to get a contractor, I've got a different channel. And if I want to do something else, it's a different channel altogether. And they've built a software that's trying to enable businesses and hiring managers to access all of those channels simultaneously. And the other thing it does really, really well, I think, is help users create statement of work. So if you're buying some consulting or want to do some project work, a traditional failing is we either have no statement of work, or the statement of work is poorly or badly written. And that makes then the management of the project and the work thereafter difficult. And if you want to have deliverable-based or outcome-based contracts without a good statement of work, you can't do it. So I think they've found a space where there's definitely a gap. And companies that are going to move towards total talent management, or even just managing what they have today in individual silos, their tool, I think, could really, really help them. And I don't know of any other tool out there that's purposed to do this. Typically, the tech is very separate. You know, the permanent hiring is one tech stack, and then the non-permanent hiring is different tech, and never the twain shall meet. So they're trying to bring all of this together under one roof, which, if a company wants to provide a service to its hiring managers without sending them down, 20 routes and trying to figure it out themselves, I think this could be really game changing. And yeah, that's one of the things I've seen recently that I really like.
That's interesting. Yeah, I've heard of Fulcrum. Actually, my father-in-law worked for them probably 10 years ago. So, yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't heard of them in a while, but that's great to bring up. I hadn't thought about them, but it's great to know they're doing so much in the space.
Yeah,
to just streamline.
I was speaking with them yesterday. They've gotten funding, so obviously they've convinced some investors that it's a good idea as well. So, yeah, I'd be interested to see where they go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like they've grown a lot, so that's great.
Yeah.
So can you tell us one unique thing about you, David? Something that maybe the folks in procurement supply chain don't really know about you, might surprise some people?
Yeah, sure. I've got a few things.
Oh, good.
One would be, it may sound a bit weird, but I'll explain it afterwards. I can tell what size shoes people wear by just looking at them. And I learned to do that. I opened and ran the first Foot Locker store in Nice in the French Riviera many years ago. So I sold sneakers. I was the manager of the store. And as a time-saving device, when someone walk in and they would say, I want to try on a pair of shoes, I just look at the feet and say, you're a size 42, 43. Yeah, okay, good. I was able to judge it just by visually. And then, I didn't need to measure the foot, so I could save some time that way. So that's something, a skill that I
fascinating.
I still have today. Not that I use it, but
yeah, what a waste.
I know, wasted talents. Really, I know I'm in the wrong job. So yeah, I started my career selling sneakers, and so I learned a few things apart from. Knowing what size people's feet were, I learned about sales and customer service, which I think has served me well throughout my career into supply chain procurement. So yeah, I learned a bit more than just the size. And the other the other thing that people wouldn't necessarily know, I did a degree in business, and I moved from the UK, where I studied, to Paris in France, and my first job after graduating with a business degree was making French fries for McDonald's on the Champs-Elysees. So 4 years of blood, sweat, and tears to end up making French fries in the Champs-Elysees McDonald's. So you got to
earn it. I love those humble beginnings. Yeah, that's right.
Got to earn it. So I've done a lot of very humble jobs, humping furniture, working on farms, working in building sites, etc. And I know the value of work. Hard work.
Well, there's that saying, if you carry your own water, you count every drop, and makes a big difference, if you have to really do the work yourself. And I personally believe that everybody should work in the service industry at least one time in their life before they enter the corporate life, to understand what customer service and sales and, it all ties in together.
Yeah, I think you're right, Katie. It's hard work, but it's a good grounding. And, the Foot Locker being an American company, and it was in Europe, I was in Foot Locker Europe, they differentiated themselves from most retailers in Europe when they had a strong focus on customer service. For example, you're serving somebody, you're bent down, and you're putting a shoe on their foot. Somebody walks in the door, and you always have to look up, hello, sir, madam, I'll be with you in a second. Just greet them. And that's a small thing, but and not do what some people do, which is try and ignore people because you're busy and you don't want to have eye contact. You have to do the opposite. So yeah, good customer service is something I hold dear, and it's something that I believe procurement is a service function, and our job is to serve the rest of the business. So you need to understand what serving a business means, but it's not in a menial way. It's not in a subservient way. It's in, you're there to add value to others in your business.
Yeah, exactly. So what's one piece of advice that you would give to folks that are maybe trying to claw up the ranks and see some of the success that you've been able to see?
Yeah, I know today is a digital world, and we talk endlessly about digital in all areas, including procurement. And maybe I'm old school, but I'm a firm believer that all business is people business. And as I mentioned earlier, the ability to sell, the ability to influence, all of the soft skills that requires, to me, are what's most important in procurement, above and beyond the technical skills. And that you have to have the technical skills. You need to know your strategic sourcing methodology, how to negotiate, and all of that good stuff. But what will differentiate you from the crowd is your ability to create relationships with your internal stakeholders, to create relationships with your suppliers, and extract value from one for the other, and do it in a way where you're considered to be a professional, fair, not some caveman procurement just wants to beat their chest and say, I beat the supplier up, look at me, aren't I great? And that's just childish. So I think the soft skills are what's most important, and that's where I would say to people, really focus. And alongside that, particularly when you're starting off, try and get as broad as experience as you can in procurement. I started in indirect procurement, and then I was asked to head up direct procurement. So, the petrochemical industry, which is sourcing chemicals, and I'm not a chemist. I had no idea what it was about, but it was the greatest thing I ever did. So moving around wherever you can and into different categories or different parts of procurement, it really broadens your horizon and it rounds you out nicely to take on responsibility as you progress in your career. So don't be too narrow when you start. Try and avoid that. And if you have a category for, say, 2-3 years and look to get into a different one after that, I think that's really helpful, because that adds value to you as an individual. And, later on, if you want to specialize in an area you're passionate about, fine, but at least you've got that broad foundational stuff there. I think that's, for me, that's the two pieces of advice I would offer up.
I love that. And, to put it more broadly, it's get out of your comfort zone. Don't stay in just one lane, feel free to explore.
Yeah. And it's easy to say, but it takes courage to do it, because you may fail. And if you have a good boss and they see some potential in you, they will hopefully offer you those opportunities to step into areas that you don't know, but they think you're talented enough to learn about them. And if the boss is really, really good, they'll back you up even when you might be struggling. So everything is not a bed of roses. You won't succeed at everything straight away, but they shouldn't crucify you either if, because of lack of experience or whatever, you may struggle somewhat. But if you've got the smarts and most of all, so just a kind of basic common sense, which, by the way, is a lot less common than one thinks, you have that ability to go from one area to another. Good procurement people can swim in many lanes. So I think that's really important. So yeah, put yourself out there. Don't be afraid to take risks. Calculate risks, of course, but if you stick to the tried and trusted, never take a risk, well, you're not likely to get very far. So.
Exactly. Well, what a great note to end on. Thank you so much, David, for this interview. Such a pleasure having you on. Yeah, you're awesome. You're absolutely a rock star. So you just wear that coat and you just flaunt it, because that's what you are. But thank you so much for being a part of Procurement Foundry and joining us today. We really appreciate it. I hope everyone that joined enjoyed it, and everyone go out there and have a very blessed week. Thanks, David.
Thank you.